All right, what's going on, guys? Episode number 25 of the Daru Strong Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Daru. Today we are doing a special Q&A section. I haven't done this since episode number 1, so I felt like I'd go ahead and answer some of your questions on Instagram. Now, before we go ahead and do that, let me go ahead and shout out the sponsors. Revive MD, ReviveSubs.com. Go check them out. The best supplements that I've used for just overall health perspective, right? I have my own line of supplements there that you can get, my own supplement stack, Phil Daru's Athlete Stack. Go ahead and check that out on their website. Use discount code DaruStrong20 to get 20% off your final purchase. Again, you get 20% off there, and you get the things that I use myself and I have my athletes use for overall health and performance. So check them out, ReviveSubs.com. Make sure you go ahead and check out my brand new program app on Train Heroic. It is an off-camp program that is year-round, and we go ahead and we formulate the program each week for you and do a Q&A. You'll have access to me and my coaches if you have any questions on the program. Fight Dominance, you can check it out on my website, DaruStrong.com. Get it now for 30% off, but it's going fast. Make sure you go ahead and check it out. And also my mentorship program, my online coaching course, that is now going to be turning into a certification course. So you'll get to take a full-on exam at the end of the course to measure out your experience and your education level, your information that you gathered over those 3 months. But the great thing about it is you get access to the portal for life. So it's a one-time fee of $1,000. You can also do several payments if you want. We make sure it's very affordable for you guys, and you'll get huge amount of information along with bi-weekly calls with me. We do a full-on Q&A every other week. So you get access to me and access to the portal year-round and all the way through for life, however long you want it. So then check it out. Make sure you go ahead, go to DaruStrong.com, and let's get after it. Now, let's get on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Daru Strong Podcast. Daru Strong Podcast.
Let's go. Mind over matter. Put your mind somewhere else and keep going. That little voice in your head is trying to stop you from getting to where you want to be. Be successful and keep moving forward.
With your host and world-renowned strength and conditioning coach, Phil Daru.
All right, guys, so I asked on Instagram to send me over your questions, and I got a large response. Hopefully I can get to them all within this hour span, because I do have to go do my rehab today. Obviously, you guys know that I had ACL surgery about a week ago. I'm about 12 days out. So again, getting my body back in order, making sure that I'm ready to progress going further, killing my rehab as much as possible. I'm attacking my rehab just like I attack my training. And again, we're making slow progress over time. Again, you know, it is a setback in a way, but we also learn from these circumstances and situations, and we grow from them as individuals. So again, enough of that. I'm going to go ahead and get into these questions, and let's see if we can get them all done. All right. So the first question comes from Coach_Treg13. He says, could you give a simple yet in-depth definition of cars, pails, and rails? And then he says, I know it's asking a lot, but again, it's very hard to kind of give you a full-on example, but FRC, functional range conditioning, is a principle-based approach to mobility training or active end-range control training. And what you want to do in these aspects when he talks about CARs, which is controlled articular rotations, and pails and rails, which is progressive and regressive angular isometric loading, those are forms of movement capabilities and overall mobility training that you can do to enhance your range of motion of each joint capsule. So when it comes down to CARs, or controlled articular rotations, the main goal is to work up the kinetic chain. So we do things from a morning routine where you start from the ankle and you work your way all the way up into the shoulders and neck. Now, what you want to accomplish there is you want to make sure that you're disassociating each joint capsule. So we're working from a joint by joint approach, and we're making sure that we are compartmentalizing the rotation of each joint as isolated as possible. So again, if I'm moving my ankle, I want to lock down my knee. If I'm moving my knee, I want to lock down my hip. If I'm moving my hip, I want to make sure my spine isn't moving, so that your hip, your ankle, your knee, your spine, and your neck and your shoulders are all moving, you know, isolated from one another. And what that does is that enhances movement quality. That's the main goal when you're talking about controlled articular rotations. You're actually flossing out the joint capsule, giving it more overall space to do work. You're setting your joints up for the proper prerequisites to get underneath load. That's going to be very important when you're trying to enhance performance as an athlete or as an individual. Because again, if you don't have the proper joint prerequisites to get underneath load, then you're just setting yourself up for further damage down the line or compensation patterns that will elicit further injury. So again, if you're looking at injury reduction, again, we can't totally prevent injury, but we can reduce the risk if we have optimal range of motion in each joint capsule and gives you the proper prerequisites to do the work ahead. When it comes down to progressive and regressive angular isometrics, the main goal again is to activate mechanoreceptors and downregulate nociceptors or your pain receptors. In order for your body, from an isometric standpoint, you're allowing the body to cope with the stresses and allow for strength adaptations to occur to elicit more overall range of motion. So again, when your body has less efficient movement and is stretched to a degree of where it feels like it's not safe to do so, it's going to tighten up. It's like walking on ice. If you try to walk on ice, your body stiffens up because it knows it's not stable enough to get into the position. So we want to make sure that we're strengthening up those end ranges with PAILs and rails, or progressive and regressive angular isometrics, keyword being isometrics. We're going to maintain that strength in those ranges. So again, you can do this from a strength perspective of training. Usually I'll have the guys, let's say for instance, from an internal and external rotation of the hip standpoint, it's called a 90-90 position. We'll do a PAILs contraction, which is actually pushing into the ground, working on the antagonistic muscle that we are trying to, well, actually the agonist muscle that we're trying to stretch, and we're activating those muscles by pushing down into the ground in external rotation. Now from there, you're going to do a regressive angular isometric, actually pulling with the antagonistic muscle, so the adductors, to get the leg off of the ground. And what that's going to do is that's going to enhance the stretchability and the active control and the active flexibility of what you can do in that position. So you set yourself up in the most active range you can, and then from there you're going to do those isometrics to enhance the movement capabilities going further. You're going to ramp yourself up from a 50% to 100% of maximal intensity in your PAILs contraction. So let's say, for instance, you're starting in your 90-90 position. You're working on the externally rotated hip. That's going to be the front side leg. You're going to push down your knee, your shin, and your ankle all into the ground with your abductors or your glutes. And you're going to drive into the ground with 50% tension, revving up to 100% maximal intensity. And you're going to do that for around 10 to 20 seconds long. So it's going to be a rev up from 50%, 60, 70, 80, 100%. You're going to hold that isometric, maximal isometric tension for about 5 to even 10 seconds if you can. And then you're going to go into a rails contraction where you're going to actively try to drive the knee and the foot off of the ground and work on making sure you're maintaining your structural integrity, so you're not compensating by moving your upper torso off the ground to gain that range from the leg to the floor. Again, a lot of times you may not be able to lift the leg off the floor, but the intent is to activate the muscles of the antagonistic that you're trying to stretch to allow for more range to occur. So again, I'm working on the adductors, I'm pulling my way up, and then after about 10 seconds of regressive angular isometrics, you're gonna sit into the stretch again with your chest high, making sure that you're not rounding forward or getting compensation there. We're trying to get into a deeper stretch for another 2 minutes, and usually I like to do 2 sets of that. So you would do an externally rotated set and you would do an internally rotated set for 2 sets through. Again, this can be done in any base position. This can be done in combat stance. This can be done in a butterfly stretch. Anything that you need to do to enhance range of motion. Again, get into an active end range, or I should say a passive end range. Sit into that stretch for 2 minutes and then go into your PAILs and rails. So again, you're working on the agonist and the antagonist of the muscle that you're trying to stretch. Hope that helps. Okay, so the next question is from, I'm probably gonna butcher this guy's name, but Tannubaba, Tannubaba. Sorry if I messed up your name, bro. Since having surgery, how do you plan on moving forward? Are you going to keep everything the same, or are you planning to alter certain parts of your training. I hope it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense, man. So, I mean, I guess right now the goal for my training moving forward is rehabbing, right? Like I talked about in the intro, gaining optimal range of motion. Right now I have full extension on my leg, which is really good. A lot of people that have full ACL reconstruction, the hardest part is gaining that full range of motion, or that full extension, I should say. And I have full extension now, and we're working on a slight hyperextension too as well. Right now I'm working on flexion. So again, I'm about 90 degrees of flexion. And so now the goal really is to maintain, or at least gain flexion, and then maintain my extension. So I want to get to about 120 degrees of flexion. So I'm working on that right now. And then also activating the muscles of the quadriceps and hamstrings, and then also making sure that I'm utilizing things like a TENS unit or a muscle stimulator to allow me to do quad sets and extensions, and also activate the muscles to fire it up, because right now we have a slight bit of atrophy going on my leg, especially on my VMO, my vastus medialis. So what that's doing is it's down regulating my ability to extend. But the great thing is that I am having some contractibility, and I'm having some activation of my quads, which a lot of times is very hard to do, especially with a surgery of that magnitude. So that's what we're working on right now. My upper body, I'm still doing some hypertrophy on that. I'm basically doing some maintenance work on that, making sure that I'm maintaining the volume necessary for maintenance. And then I'm not going crazy with ballistics or anything of that nature. I mean, I'm just trying to maintain my muscle mass and my conditioning of my muscles. So doing more longer volume sets and less rest periods, and making sure that I'm doing it frequently is the most important part. And then the rehab is constant in little sets here and there, little exercises every 12, maybe even every 8 hours almost. And then I'm doing maximal rehab with my physical therapist, Dr. Christiana Marin, 3 times per week, and also on my own, maybe around, now we're looking at about 5 times a week. So I'm really hammering down the rehab. Again, I'm making sure that I'm resting and I'm not overdoing it. I'm just undulating the intensities and volume based on the day. Okay, next question. Okay, so next question is from Vlada_Nezvik. That's it. I know I got a lot of overseas and global followers, so I appreciate it, man, but y'all names kind of mess me up sometimes. He says, as a young coach that works with young athletes ages 6 to 12, what is the best thing I can do to get their trust so that they can view me as an authority? I'm 20 years old and they view me as a friend, which is not bad, but I want them to take me more seriously. As a young coach with youth athletes, you want to lead by example. The one thing that I can say now, working with a lot more youth baseball athletes and just youth athletes in general, is I always make sure that I show them that I have the ability to do what I'm asking them to do. So with that, I remember a story I'll tell you guys. I was actually doing a video for my YouTube channel, and I was training down in the pit. If you guys ever watch any of our YouTube channel and in my Instagram, you see that I have a pit where I have all the weight room work being done. And I was training and I was lifting a fair amount of weight. I was doing, I think I was doing sets of like 475 with sumo deadlift and doing some box squats and things of that nature. And I was getting after it pretty much, right? But I was leading by example, and the kids came by and they heard the music and they heard the weights slamming and they seen all the weights on the bar. And they kind of peeked over and they were looking at me in astonishment almost, like, look at this guy lifting all his weight, yelling and screaming with tattoos and big muscles and so on and so forth. But the thing that I got out of that was I found that they truly looked up to that. They liked it. They liked to see that, the guy that's teaching them how to be strong is actually strong, or the guy that's teaching them how to swing a baseball bat can actually swing a baseball bat. So the goal really is to show them that you are capable of doing just as well as them. And then from there, you want to make sure that their parents are buying into you, and you have a conversation with the parents and making sure that you're on the same page with them. Because if they don't trust you as a coach, they're not going to be apt to tell their kid to trust you as a coach. So you want to make sure that you're getting in with the parents and making sure that they can understand who you are and what you stand for. And then you want to communicate firmly with the young individual, like bringing them to the side and have a conversation, informing them of who you are and what your role is as a coach and what their role is as an athlete, right? And how the respect has to be there. You almost have to be a father figure in such ways. So make sure that you're leading by example, you're communicating properly, and you're giving them the proper things so that they can understand that you're set as an authority, and not so much to a point where they can't come to you for advice, but more so that they respect your time as they go and ask you for that advice. So hopefully you can take that with you, man. Okay, so the next question is Thomas_Brown03. How would you program strength training for military soldiers? What exercises do you feel have the best carryover? So for military and tactical training, the main thing first and foremost is we want to make sure that we're building up work capacity or general physical preparedness. So that's things like sled drags, yoke carries, farmers carries, things of that nature, rucksacks carries. They're going to be moving with a large amount of load on their body. So we want to make sure that they have the physical prerequisites to do that work. We want to make sure that they have the endurance, the muscular and strength endurance to stand the test of time, right? When they're going on calls, or they have to have that strength to carry, 1.5 times their body weight, and make sure that they have the ability to do that for a long duration is going to be very important. We want to make sure that we are increasing maximal strength, because if we can increase their maximal and absolute strength, carrying a large amount of weight isn't going to be as taxing or energy sapping as if you would do it with a less maximal strength output. So again, if I can increase their 1 rep max, then 50% of their 1 rep max is not going to be as bad as 80% of their 1 rep max. So if I had a guy that can lift 600 pounds, if he picks up a sack that's about 200 pounds, well, that's not as heavy as a guy that can only lift 300 pounds. And now you're doing more of a maximal effort lift as opposed to a sub-maximal effort lift. So it can increase their conditioning if you increase their absolute strength. And alongside that, when you increase their absolute strength, it sets the prerequisites for all other correctives and all of the strength adaptations that can occur. And also, you're going to bring up all those other demands of what they need to do, whether it be endurance, power, strength, and all those things in between. Okay. Another thing that I want to make sure that you're doing is going to be on building up alactic and anaerobic endurance, or alactic and lactic anaerobic endurance. Because of the fact that they're going to be bringing their heart rate up to a high level and they're increasing that throughout time, we want to make sure that we have the ability to, one, buffer out lactate, and we have the ability to repeat bouts of energy for a long duration. So again, if they're going on a run, if they're doing a certain type of a drill, they want to have the ability to repeat that drill and have efficiency with their technical aspects of their training. So again, keeping that in mind, making sure you're bringing up the energy systems appropriately to help them with that. Okay. Posterior chain strength, right? That's going to be good for eliminating or at least reducing the risk of injury. You want to make sure that they have the ability to extend. You want to have the ability to carry certain objects and do that for a long duration again. So building up posterior chain strength from the upper back down to the hamstrings are going to be very important. And then something that gets very overlooked is foot strengthening to eliminate like plantar fasciitis. Also foot strengthening to enhance the capabilities to produce force, to penetrate the ground and make sure that you're producing that force throughout the ground so that you can move more efficiently. Also eliminating knee tendonitis or tendinopathy, anything going up the kinetic chain that's going to induce any type of inflammation buildup. So you want to have active control of your feet. You want to have proper placement. You want to be able to create torque, and you want to be able to have great functioning of the big toe and all the toes surrounding it. So again, toe and foot strengthening are going to be important, and mobility of the foot and ankle are also going to be highly important too as well. So you can use things like that FRC, the functional range conditioning, CARS, and pails and rails techniques to enhance that. Okay. And then from a method standpoint, from a programming standpoint, I like to use conjugate with the constant variance of exercises so that they can get strong in all different modalities. They can get strong with all exercises so that whatever comes their way, they're able to cope with that stress. The goal really, again, they don't know what's going to happen to them, especially like when you're talking about tactical athletes and let's say, for instance, fire department, right? Firefighters, they don't know what's going to happen when they go on a call. So they need to be prepared accordingly. Anything could happen. They can get in a call, or they can go to the fire department. They could be resting 1 minute and then have to go on a call the next minute, and it could be a 12-foot story burning building, and they have to get their guys out of there. Maybe there's a guy in there that's 300 pounds. They got to pick that guy up, or maybe there's a young child that they have to go back and get. So they have to have that variance of exercises so that they can be strong in all these different ranges of motion. Same thing goes for military. Again, there's so many different things that'll come into play, and so many aspects are going to be thrown at you. So you got to be ready for it. And that's why I like conjugate for that approach. So conjugate style for their method and principles of training and programming, and then also making sure you're putting in posterior chain, foot strengthening, working on dynamic strength for explosive power, alactic and lactic endurance, and then also building up work capacity and increasing their overall max strength too as well. So all those things will come into play with the conjugate system. All right, hope that helps. Okay, so the next one is almost similar, and we're going to go to a different sport. Would be, how would you program conditioning for sports like basketball inside the weight room? Now, when it comes down to conditioning, do you mean endurance training? Now, with those guys, they're running a lot, so we're gonna have to build up their aerobic capacity. We're also gonna have to build up aerobic power. So I would work on those aspects of training, building up their ability to take in and utilize oxygen, and their ability to repeat bouts of energy too as well. So the main 3 energy systems that I would work on would be aerobic power, aerobic capacity, and then also some alactic capacity work for the short sprint intervals when they're trying to drive the ball down the lane. And repeat that going back onto defense. So again, the game is constant. There's really no settling a lot of the times, and if there is, it's very minimal. So again, we want to have that ability, but we also want to have the ability to recover. So you have to have a large aerobic base in order to do so. So I'd work that in throughout the week. I would do something like a high-low method, like a Charlie Francis approach, where I would work on high aerobic work, or I should say aerobic work, and then on higher intensities of alactic capacity training, and I would undulate that throughout the weeks. As far as the weight room work, we want to increase stability and joint mobility. And that's one thing that I don't see a lot of. The guys are coming down hard on their ankles, and they're coming down hard on their knees and hips. So creating that optimal mobility to absorb, and then the stability to again sustain that force being brought down on their joints is going to be important. Tendon stiffness again is going to be important too as well. Remember, they're jumping and doing ballistic work all the time in their skills practice. So contrary to what people believe, you don't have to do a large amount of plyometrics with them. You have to actually, especially inside of a season, I'd work on more of the structural integrity aspect of training, trunk stability and leg strengthening, because that's going to enhance the things that they don't really get inside their skills or inside the games that they're playing. They're getting a large amount of jumping work and plyometrics inside the sport itself. So let's work on things that they don't get so that we can enhance the body globally as a whole. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, let's see, next one. So it says, so Baron.Daniel Bro. Have you found your ACL injury to be a blessing in disguise? Yes, of course. I mean, anything that's going to test you mentally and physically, that's going to change the situation, is going to enhance your abilities to be better, right? It's going to give your body the ability and your mind the ability to callous your mind with hard work ahead. So you know that there's going to be something that you have to overcome. There's going to be certain situations and certain circumstances that you cannot do at the moment because of the fact that you have this type of injury. Now, an ACL tear, a meniscus tear, it's a major surgery. I had a full reconstruction, but I am, blessed to say that I am walking on my feet right now. Like, I don't have to use a crutch because I set the guidelines. I set those prerequisites beforehand. I set it for a year now. because I understood what was going to happen. So I planned it appropriately, but you can never fully plan for what's going to happen. So what I'm doing is I'm adjusting. The goal is to adjust to any situation and any circumstance, no matter what the situations are, whether it be good nor bad. So finding out what you need to do in order to overcome those obstacles and getting stronger mentally and physically from it is obviously going to get me to the next level and progress me. So again, yes, it definitely is a blessing in disguise in a way, but you should treat any type of circumstance the same way. Whether if you lose your job, whether you get a pay cut, whether you lose a family member, take that as an opportunity to get stronger, mentally tougher, and that's gonna help you in the long run. Hope that helps, man. All right, next question. AC Fitness 39. Have you ever thought about traveling to different countries and doing seminars? Ireland would be deadly. Well, yes, I have done, I think, 12 countries so far. Last year and the year before that, I was heavy on my seminar tours. I've done a lot of different countries. Haven't gone to Ireland, however. I do want to go there. So if you guys, once the COVID situation starts to subside, then maybe we can go ahead and you guys, whoever wants to bring me out there, we can find a gym for me to put together a workshop and we can make it happen. So let me know, hit me up. We'll find out. All right. Next question. We got, let me see here. Okay, next question is from M.Bamani _. What do you think about block periodization? Now, I know you guys see that I'm more biased towards conjugate, and that's usually the programming that I would utilize, the periodization schemes that I would utilize or method I would utilize to train. When it comes down to block periodization, I do feel like it does have its place, especially for intermediate, beginner athletes and guys that have seasons, right? For combat sport athletes, they're training year round. They're always fighting. They're always competing multiple times throughout the year. And they're pretty insignificantly known of when they're going to fight. So again, we got to find out what's going to give them the best opportunity to be ready at all times. So I always like the notion of staying ready as opposed to having to get ready. So I use the conjugate system for that. Now with the block style, you have phases, you have phase potentiation if you do it correctly. And if you can maintain or evaluate the system based on detraining effects, if you can make sure you understand the athlete and understand their experience level and you don't have that detraining occur, well then block periodization would be the approach to go. Again, it depends on the circumstances and situations, but again, if you're looking at an athlete that knows the season, knows when they need to get ready, and you know the certain delineations that will occur based off of non-training in that particular adaptation or that particular stimulus of that adaptation, then you can work on block periodization. But for me, I'll stick to conjugate. Okay, so the next one is 8-Day Slater Fitness. He asks, what is your opinion of eccentric flywheel training and when would you implement it into your training? Example, machine like K-Box 4. Now, if I were to get I haven't used a flywheel. Hopefully my guy Corey will hook me up from fightcampconditioning.com. If you haven't checked out fightcampconditioning.com, go ahead and check him out. He also has a podcast. But Corey asked me about it, and I think I'm going to go ahead and check it out. But I've done some research on it, and I see what the mechanisms behind it is. And now I can give you an overall view of what I think would be beneficial. Again, like I said, I don't have experience with it. I haven't used it to that degree. But what it looks like it's doing, again, is it's good for eccentric overload. Right, it enhances muscle hypertrophy, obviously, with the eccentric load. It increases deceleration strength. So again, instead of doing a drop jump or a death drop, you can utilize that K-Box 4 or again, like I said, the flywheel in any manufacturer to enhance that capability without having to put stress on the joints. Again, I would put it mainly in GPP with the higher reps to build up that general physical preparedness and coordination, inter and intramuscular coordination. And then also I would use it for yielding isometrics for optimizing load-bearing efficiency, and then also metabolic stress for hypertrophy. So those are the main things I would do. I would probably put it in off camp or going into camp so I can set my body up for higher levels of plyometric training and force production through there. But again, let's say for instance, if we have some athletes that need more accessory work, I would probably use this for all of the accessory exercises. So all those special exercises that I need to bring up some hypertrophy in the right ranges and the right body parts, let's say for the posterior chain for combat sport athletes or any athlete in general, then we can do so. We just got to be careful, especially if they are a weight class sport athlete. We don't want to grow them out of their weight class, but it's very hard to do so, especially inside of a camp when they're doing a lot of conditioning training anyway. So yeah, I would do that. Again, I would focus on it off camp, going into camp, and then I would put it in for the accessory work, maybe 1 or 2 exercises inside of camp. But I'll let you know once I get it. All right, so let me go to the next question. Okay, so Rye_Jitsu, how would you program for a recreational BJJ athlete that wants to gain little muscle, that wants to gain a little muscle, so he wants to gain some muscle and fill out for the weight class? So with BJJ, if you want to gain a little muscle, then you definitely want to do more higher volume sets. We want to work on the hypertrophy ranges of 6 to 12 reps. We want to work on tempo training. We want to work on local muscular endurance. So setting up your tempos in a fashion that is consistent is going to be key. So like something like a 3-1-3 or 3 centric, 1 isometric, 3 concentric, and keeping it consistent through tempos is going to be efficiently, is going to work efficiently for what you're trying to do. And again, when you're talking about gi practitioners, it's very good because you get some sort of local muscular endurance there, especially in the grips and the forearms. If you're trying to build up muscle for BJJ, I would focus more on the hamstrings. I would focus on the upper back and actually the entire posterior chain again. Glutes, upper back, mid back, they don't get a whole lot of that, especially if you're a guard practitioner, you're a guard player. The goal again is to balance out the body so you eliminate those future risk of injury. You know, you're getting a large amount of work in the anterior chain, especially if you're crunched forward and in that internally torqued position. So pulling the body back and gaining some strength there is going to give you the ability to pull harder, pull them into your guard, and then work your guard retention. If you're on top, if you're a top guy or girl, then I would say you definitely want to work on your upper back strength and upper back hypertrophy. Also want to work on your tricep strength. So again, when you're trying to posture up and pass, you know, definitely want to work on that. But again, if you're trying to build up those muscles that are going to be appropriate for the sport, those are the muscles that you need to focus on. Triceps and posterior chain would be efficient for you. So hope that helps, man. Okay, so Christoph.cw, what is your focus on stage 1 off-camp training, aerobic capacity, and the tempo method with weights, ? Yeah, you got it pretty much dead on. So my goal for off-camp in general is going to be increasing work capacity. So I need to increase the ability to take in and utilize oxygen. I need to have the ability to breathe properly. So diaphragmatic breathing is going to be appropriate, breathing through the nose, teaching them how to breathe through their nose. Aerobic plyometrics we also like to do to enhance the joint integrity, all right, the tendon stiffness to allow for the athlete to do higher levels of plyometric training going into camp. Tempo method is going to be good for local muscular endurance and building up some hypertrophy, especially if they lost some of it with the weight cut from the fight prior. So I'm looking at all those things in one, and then again, I'm making sure that I'm integrating that into the weight room work, whether it be for the conditioning factor, because again, I don't want to throw the organism in 2 different directions trying to sustain an adaptation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to primarily work in the weight room. I'm going to primarily work in that local muscular endurance ranges of tempo work, and then some work capacity with sled drag variations for fast switch capacity training, so on and so forth. And I'm going to do that for however long I have. You know, a lot of times I don't have a large amount of time off camp because guys are taking fights consistently. You know, you want to fight every 2 to 3 months primarily for the guys on the come up. the guys that are world-class, world champions, well, we have a little bit more time to set that baseline again. But you know, the whole goal is to get them into conjugate and keep them rolling again, because we want to make sure that they're ready and capable of doing the training, and also ready and capable of taking on a fight at any point in time. So again, we want to develop a solid base, and then once we develop that base, then we want to ride off that conjugate so we can bring up all these demands at once. All right, hope that helps, man. Let me see here. Okay, so the podium performance. Thoughts on floating heel off the floor training for athletes who need to sprint and jump like your football players. Yes, I do believe foot strengthening is a key contributor to force production. So increasing the ability to produce force from the ground up. When you do the heel off the ground, you are strengthening up the forefoot, and you're strengthening up the ability to create an arch. And when you can do that, that'll create higher levels of torque. And also big toe flexion is going to be important. So flexing and pushing down the big toe into the ground is going to activate the glute. It's going to activate the glute to contract, and then the glute is going to stabilize the hip. The hip will stabilize the spine. So again, you'll have less injury, and you'll have better force production throughout the ground. So I definitely want that, especially for sprinting athletes, and also any athlete that's trying to produce force from a horizontal fashion to a vertical fashion, right? So again, foot strengthening is key for any athlete. Okay, she has the longest name ever, but I'm gonna try to get it. Don't get mad at me. Baz Istamad Aruza. This is a long name. But anyway, so she writes, for the people who live in big cities such as NYC, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, etc., how can we replace the power work from the sleds? For example, how would you substitute the sled rows on the Fight Ready program, or sled variations like push-pull, etc.? Also, in that same video or same vibe, how can you replace the glute ham raise machine when you have only access to a big box gym or crappy bodybuilding machines? Now, when it comes to glute ham raise, you can use a lat pull down machine with a dowel if you need it for to stabilize yourself, and for a little bit of assistance. Basically, you're gonna take your legs, you're gonna put your knees on the pad where you would sit on, and then put your heels on the back where you would put your quads or your knees on, and you would fall back this way. So again, if you have the pull down machine, right, you would lay this way as opposed to sitting up straight. So you're going this way, coming up, instead of pulling down there. And again, the goal again is to increase hamstring and glute strength. So you want to make sure that you're pushing your hips in, creating that squeeze of the glute, and then opening up and pulling up with your hamstrings. With the sleds, if you don't have access to sleds, you can use something like band marches. If you're talking about rows and other upper body variations, again, bands will do a great deal of job there. You can get accommodated resistance with that, with overspeed eccentrics, or a loose eccentric where you're actually just letting the band pull you back without any type of resistance there, so you're not getting too much eccentric load. So you'll have less tissue glide, which will eliminate a lot of DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness. But I would do band techniques with that. So instead of doing a sled row, you would do a band row, band pull apart, banded face pull, things of that nature. And then again, for the sled drag variations, you can always do an incline sprint on a treadmill with band tension behind you. Or again, you can just tie the band to a rig or a rack and then do your marches with that, with a weight vest on and ankle weights if you can get it. So I hope that helps there. Okay, this is the long one. I'll try to get it down. So, All One Alone writes, hi Phil, how do you implement local muscular endurance work around aerobic alactic work in your off-camp GPP program? I've seen that there are a lot of lactic work in your new program, but when going by some science-based sources, lactic work should be reserved for a short period of time, only when going closer to camp, because it would interfere with the aerobic and alactic systems development. It would not allow for a lot over overall volume because very taxing on the system, free radicals build up, yep, etc. I know you would not do it if it wouldn't make no sense. Please share some light on it. Correct me if I get wrong there. Okay, so yeah, on the new program, there is lactic power work. The reason why there's lactic power work is because we're trying to build up lactate into the working tissue to allow for buffering capacity to be attained going into the camp. Again, I'm not doing aerobic work inside of the training of the weight room. We're doing that outside of the training in the weight room to, again, one, take away from the lactic work that we're building up. So we're basically making sure that we're getting a large amount of oxygen into the working tissue, and then we're doing some lactic work inside of the weight room because it will integrate into the weight room training, because again, like we're doing tempo work because this is an off-camp type of program. So again, we're trying to build up local muscular endurance, and we're integrating the energy systems of training based upon the weight room work. And again, I'm not doing it in the same time frame as an aerobic system because that would totally throw the organism in two different directions and cause maladaptation of buffering capacity. So we're trying to work on building up the strength and the endurance and the capacity to do work. That's why they're doing more frequency of lactic power. Now, we're not doing capacity training because, again, I want them to have a large amount of time to recover so that they're building up their ability to accumulate that lactate and then using lactate retention so that it can allow for that muscle to localize and understand those stresses put upon it and allow it to buffer it out going further. As far as the aerobic work, again, we're taking that away from the side of the training of the weight room work, again, because we want to make sure that we're getting both sides of that energy system worked on. Getting into camp, however, we're going to be working primarily on alactic capacity and still maintaining our aerobic capacity through the zone 2 training modalities. So again, I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. But for the most part, like with the GPP work and any type of lactic work that we're doing outside of camp is going to be primarily based on building up that ability to cope with those stresses or those byproducts so that we can buffer it out going further. Okay, so the next question is Big Boy Black. Hey Daru, what do you think are the important muscles to be trained for a sport like judo? Could you recommend a split? Thank you. So the important muscle groups to train for judo would be, rotational exercises. So any type of oblique sling. You want to definitely work on the multifidi. You want to work on your anti-rotators. You want to work on external, internal obliques. You want to work on serratus. You want to work on upper back, scap. You also want to work on your hip flexors and hip extensors. Just because you want to make sure that we're maintaining a base of stability, especially when they're going and starting to work on stabilize themselves to not get thrown, and then work on their throws from there from a ballistic and or plyometric standpoint. So working on stabilizing the body in anti-rotation, anti-flexion, and then also working on ballistics and plyometrics with that flexion and extension to allow for higher force production to occur or rate of force production to occur. When it comes down to a split, it really just depends. A lot of the guys that I have, obviously, I have Angelica Delgado, I have Alex Turner. They are, when in season, they are training year round and they're fighting year round. So they're going to competitions almost every month. So we run a conjugate style where we will do maximal effort and dynamic effort on the same week. We will make sure that they're getting in their maximal effort lower, maximal effort upper, and then the dynamic full body. And in that time, you're going to be working on maximal effort lifts, compound lifts that are conducive to the sport. So anything that has the highest carryover, whether that be, a Zercher squat, a front squat, a sumo deadlift, a trap bar deadlift, basic general movements that will enhance their capabilities on the mat. And what we'll do is we'll work on both sides of the force velocity curve so we can maintain or at least progress going further every day and every week and every year, to allow for no detraining to occur and also to avoid the law of accommodation. So I'll do that, and then as far as their conditioning, we want to make sure that we're doing those repeat bouts of energy. So we're working on alactic capacity, and we're also doing some aerobic power work too as well, getting in the higher levels of that VO2 max to allow for better oxygen to be utilized and to maintain that level of energy throughout the entire tournament. Again, because the day is long, right? They're doing multiple matches throughout the day. Want to make sure that they have the aerobic capacity and the ability to take in oxygen to recover, and then have the ability to repeat bouts of energy, especially inside of a match. So I hope that helps. All right, next one. Akash FC 205 says, how does flat feet affect the fighter's performance? How do you deal with it? Are there any top level fighters with flat feet? Yeah, I'm not gonna call out any of my top level fighters with flat feet, but I will say this: yes, flat feet inhibits the ability to produce force. It inhibits the ability to be elusive, have the ability to be on their toes a lot better. A lot of my boxers don't have this issue. A lot of my BJJ and some wrestlers will have this problem, but the boxers are always on their toes, are always jumping around, they're always doing jump roping, so that's going to create that arch, and that's going to create that strength there in the feet. So yes, we definitely, again, it goes back to the forefoot, the forefoot strengthening. We definitely want to do that. We want to create a taller arch so that we can create that torque and momentum and force production through the ground. So that's very important. If you have flat feet, it's kind of that collapsed arch. You're not going to be able to produce as much force into the ground as possible, especially from a dynamic movement perspective, whether it be horizontal or vertical. And again, when we're talking about combat sports, horizontal force displacement is going to have higher carryover. So we want to make sure that we're working in those ranges. We're increasing the strength of the feet. Again, I'll go back to that, and increasing the ability to move the toes independently of one another. So
that will help with the arch?
Yeah. And there's other things of the arch that you would do is, there's things like short foot strengthening, where you would basically take a band or take a piece of paper, you would crush the big toe into the ground, and you would have that piece of paper under the arch or under the outside of the foot, and they would have to grab that piece of paper while you're pulling it away. So that's creating that torque there, allowing you to create that stability and strength, and that's going to create that higher arch. Another thing, if they lack the ability to flex the big toe, you can put that tactile cue underneath their big toe. As you're trying to pull it out, they have to maintain that tightness there. So they're actually crushing the ground or crushing that piece of paper or piece of plastic with their big toe, enhancing glute activation, which is going to enhance the ability to produce force from the ground up. Okay. Let me see. All right, so I got one more. Okay, what is the role of genetics? Same question, same guy. What is the role of genetics in a fighter? I have heard about certain body types good for combat sports and some body types which are not. Yeah, I do believe that in a way. I think everybody is built for a certain sport, and that's why the Soviets did what they did in the rule of three. They would find out what exactly a young individual or a youth athlete would be good at from a genetic standpoint, from a limb length standpoint, from a body composition standpoint, or an energy demand standpoint, whether they're aerobic or anaerobically sound, and then they would put them into a sport in a position that they're going to be successful in. When it comes down to fighters, I do believe longer limb fighters are going to have the advantage, especially from the striking perspective, and also from the ground perspective. With the concept of jiu-jitsu, you have the ability to wrap the opponent up in certain positions, right? When you're talking about Darce chokes and anaconda chokes, and rubber guard and things of that nature, you have to have limbs that are going to be appropriate enough to get around your opponent. But there is things for short limb guys to benefit from too. I mean, you got things like powerlifting. Even wrestling is very good for shorter limb individuals to a degree, because it is hard to arm drag them. It's hard to, it's very hard to, get somebody down with short limbs. Again, you look at a guy like I have, Desmond Moore. He's not a tall guy by any means, but he's a very good athlete and a very, very solid wrestler because he's low to the ground. So he has the ability to get in on a shot a lot faster than a guy that's taller. So again, those aspects that you have to take into account. When it comes to MMA, I think a good mix between the both, having long limbs and a short torso, would be very good because again, it gives you a limited target and it gives you the ability to strike from longer ranges. So you have the ability to hit and not get hit. So hope that helps. All right, guys. So those are all the questions. Again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're watching on my YouTube, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's Daru Strong Podcast. Trying to build that channel up. And again, leave me a comment down there on iTunes. Leave me a rating. And also, you can find me on SoundCloud, Spotify. I think we're on, what are we on? We're on Google Play, all those other apps. iHeartRadio too as well. And then the iPhone app, you can get there too with all the podcasts on that. Again, trying to build this thing up, so please make sure you like, share, and support the cause. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.